Welcome back, everybody. Council, are we ready for to proceed with the next witness?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Good afternoon, members of the audience. Yes, we are ready to proceed. Mr. Usher, can you please get the witness?
Thank you.
I, Malick Mboob,
do swear that
I will speak the truth,
I will speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you, Mr. Usher, for swearing in the witness. Good afternoon, Mr. Witness.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the TRRC. As you know, my name is Sagar. We've already been introduced. Can I just go through with you some of the rules we have for your testimony? Can you please speak clearly into the microphone? Speak loudly as well to the hearing of the commissioners and the audience. I would advise you to take it slowly so that the interpreters will be able to keep up with your testimony, since your testimony is being translated into various local languages. Just make sure you speak also into the microphone. Can you kindly wait until I have finished my questions before you answer? We will be going through various topics in your testimony, starting with your personal details, your educational background in brief, your work history in brief as well. And we will concentrate on your dismissal and personal victimization at the hands of the NIA and also those of others who you've witnessed. We will end with the impact this has had on your life, and we will also give you an opportunity to say any last words you may wish to tell the Gambian public after you have been questioned by the commissioners. I hope that is clear and you understand.
Very well.
Are you ready to proceed?
I am.
What are your full names?
My name is Malick Mboob.
And where do you live?
Currently residing at Wellingara, West Coast region.
Where are you from originally?
From Talinding.
And are you currently working?
Yes, I'm currently with Guaranteed Trust Bank, Gambia Limited.
Can you just give me a brief overview of your work, your educational background, actually? Give me the dates and the institutions that you have attended from primary school up to higher education.
Okay, I did my primary education at Trrc Primary School from 1989 to 1995. Then from there I proceeded to St. Augustine's Junior from 1995 to 1998. And from 1998 to to 2001, I was at Gambia High School. Then sat to the WAS exam in 2001. Then in 2012 to 2013, I did a course at Stratford College. That's a diploma in mass communication. Then the following year, a graduate diploma in mass communication also. Then from 2015 to 2018, I did my bachelor in journalism and digital media from the University of the Gambia, University of Lagos, Nigeria.
Kindly take us through your professional background. What places have you worked since you finished school up to date?
As a young graduate way back in 2001, with passion to become a journalist, I joined the Daily Observer straight from high school. Just like any other corp reporter today or staff reporter, we all started as a freelance reporter in June 2001. Then from June 2001 until January 2005, I was with the Daily Observer as a freelance reporter, staff reporter, and news editor. While I was news editor, I was also given another assignment as the State House correspondent for Daily Observer at the time. Then from there, I resigned from Daily Observer, then joined RVTH on the 17th of May 2006 until the following year. Sorry, 17th of May 2005 until May 2006, when I was arrested, detained, dismissed, and tortured. Then after 8 months, when I was released, I worked for Suwaibu Konate for just 6 months. He was traveling to the United Kingdom, I believe, for medical checkup, so he asked me to wait for him as editor of his paper. That's the News and Report magazine. Then from there, when he returned, I moved on to Linger magazine as the administrator. After Linger, I joined Global Properties as head of media relations, then to GT Bank in March 2009 up till date.
For the purposes of your testimony, we will concentrate on your experience at the Daily Observer, and we will concentrate on that very briefly before we move on to your experience at the RVTH when you were actually arrested, detained, and tortured. If you would just like to tell us how you started at the Daily Observer, what position you held at the time, and who you were working with closely there.
Yes, as I said earlier on, I have this passion to become a journalist way back in Gambia High School. But I could remember when I was in Gambia High School, I was the editor-in-chief of our school newsletter. With the help of Daily Observer, then we were able to produce our first newsletter where I served as the editor-in-chief. So from there, I wasted no time when I finished that high school. Then I said, let me join Daily Observer. As usual, from freelance reporter, I could remember writing on political issues, crime, and the like. But not too long, because most of the time, if you come in the media industry, you spend some time as a freelance reporter. Freelance reporting means whatever story that has been published, that's how you are paid. You are not a staff reporter. But I could remember the late Mboob Balde telling me that you have to be staff. I said, why? He said, because what you are claiming on a weekly basis is more than what I am paying my staff reporters. Then his staff reporters were paid $1,000. I said, no. The reason why I'm paid more than them on a weekly basis is because I'm performing well. So he said, no, you have to be staffed. So that push and pull until some time, then I was staffed. So I was still doing my daily beats, going around getting stories, either groundbreaking interviews, unfolding stories, covering some bits on politics, crime, and the like. Then along the line, I was also made news editor of the paper. Then Data Sose, who just testified an hour ago, was our editor-in-chief. So we have two editors in the newsroom and the sports editor, who happens to be Lamin Cham then. So you have myself, Data Sose, and Pakemo Jaju, who is currently in the United Kingdom, as editors in the newsroom.
Whilst you were a reporter at the Daily Observer newspaper, did you have cause to work closely at the State House? Yes.
At some point between 2002, 2003, up to early 2004, I was the one covering presidential functions, be it or even the vice president as well. Anytime there is a coverage, they will call us, but not always. Because I could remember then Marcel Tomasi was the director of press and public relations. Sometimes there's this segregation. You will go, they said, no, you are not invited. It's just the state media we want. That is the GRTS, both radio and television, plus Gambia Daily, then was the government daily newspaper. Sometimes they will invite you. At times, if you go on your own, they will send you out.
As State House correspondent at the time, were you working closely with anyone at the State House?
Yes, because there is this press office, which was manned by Marcel Tomasi, and then you have his assistant at the time, Mamsid Sise, as the press officer. So anytime there is coverage and you are invited, they will clear you as usual at the gate, then you go to the press office. Or there is a waiting, if it is a tete-a-tete with the president, there is somewhere you will wait, just by the president's office, to interview whoever was with the president. Or if another function where it's an open function, all of you will be there. But otherwise, you will just wait outside to interview whoever was with the president at the time.
And during this time, do you remember actually writing a story about any significant event at the State House?
Yes, I covered a lot. I could remember the St. Teresa's issue, when the St. Teresa student was banned from covering her hair. I could remember there was an issue here in 2002, when the student wants to wear a hijab, but the school authorities say no to it. And the president made a pronouncement that come September, no students should wear hijab to go to school. I can remember those things. I wrote about that extensively, but they were not happy about it. But thank God, nothing happens to me. Then again, I could remember covering a lot of events, like visiting heads of states coming to Gambia, because then you have a lot of heads of state, like Bissau, anytime he comes for a state visit, we'll always cover it. Anytime the president is out, or commissioning a project, or just any other activity.
Do you remember covering any stories surrounding a member of staff at the State House?
Yes. I wrote a lot about the late Musa Jame, Captain Musa Jame, who was the principal protection officer to the president. Because at that time, Musa was the PPO to the president. He was arrested for allegedly stealing food commodities from the Kanilai farms. Then I was the State House correspondent, and some of these stories were published, like his arrest and the places he was detained, like Fajara Barracks, Yundum, Mile 2. I wrote a lot about that when he was in detention and when he was arrested for allegedly stealing food commodities from the Kanilai farms.
At the time you were State House correspondent, who was the director of press?
Marcel Tomasi was the director of press, then Mam Said was his assistant as the press officer.
And did he remain there? Did you have any other director of press at the State House during your tenure at the Daily Observer newspaper?
Marcel was there until the time I left the Observer to join RVTH. But prior to Marcel, Fatou Jahumpa Sise was the director of press at the State House.
Did you have any relationship with Fatoumata Jahumpa Sise at the time?
Yes, professional relationship, because she was one time a journalist, a reporter, just like us. She was one time DPPR State House. She was one time Speaker of the National Assembly. She was one time a nominated member of the National Assembly. So I have interviewed her severally. We have that professional relationship at the time.
And did that relationship continue even after you had left your position at the Daily Observer?
Yes, it continued until after. Until after my dismissal. No, it stopped at my arrest and detention when I left Observer to join RVTH. Since then, that relationship has not been there.
Can you tell us of any significant events that you witnessed during your time at the Daily Observer?
Yes, when I was at the Daily Observer and the aftermath of Beda's murder in December 2004, because then Observer was regarded as a mouthpiece of the APRC government. But when we were there, we were always saying no to this. We are here, we are an independent newspaper. As far as we are concerned, this paper is owned by a private individual, based on what we have on the paper, that's Amadou Samba. So we were writing stories, despite the fact that from time to time they will call us to say we don't want X, Y, and Z to appear in the paper. But we always defy those orders. As long as the story is factual and balanced, we always publish it. So when Deda was murdered in 2004, the Gambia Press Union organized a procession to protest for his murder. And the procession was to start from the Arch 22nd in Banjul to the Ministry of Interior. Then Ministry of Interior used to be at OAU Boulevard, where you have immigration headquarters currently. And Suleiman Masane Sise was the Minister of Interior at the time. As usual, editors, we said, okay, because Deda was our colleague, and we have to be seen as in support of what they are doing. So if other people say we will have a Black News Week, we should follow suit, because what they organized was that no paper should carry anything for a week. Secondly, we all assembled at the July 22nd, sorry, McCarthy Square. No, Act 22nd, moved to and marched to the Interior Minister to hand over a petition. We said we should follow suit. If the owners of the Observer is not happy, fine, but we will do it, because they are our colleagues. Otherwise, they will see us as sympathetic to the government. So we agreed on this. That week, no edition was out. The day itself, we mobilized all the reporters, staff reporters, freelance reporters. We joined our colleagues at the I-22. We marched to Banjul. But before we start the procession, I could remember immediately I arrived at the arch, I saw a lot of people, including security officers, because the GPU, they printed some T-shirts, which bears Deda's picture. And some of this T-shirt was worn by some security officers, but my colleagues are not aware of this. So when I got to that point, I saw a lot of NIA officials, a lot of soldiers at the State House wearing our shirts. So they told my colleagues that they are from the private radio stations, but I recognized them. I could remember calling Alkinki Sanyang, who now works with NEA. He used to be at the Observer as a reporter. He has a column called, he was writing about environmental issues. So I told Alkinki, some of the people here are not journalists. They are not from the radio station. Even the private photographers, they are not from the, some of them are from the NIA. I started picking them out, one after the other. And my colleague journalists, they came, they asked them to move out, and even, in fact, to remove our shirts. So that brought in push and pull. I could remember the NIA cameraman at the time, Babu Njai, was filming shots, but they thought he's from the private, just from any other freelance photographer. So I told Babu Njai to give me the camera he's having. He refused, and I forcefully took the camera from him, removed the cassette, and I could remember smashing the cassette. Then immediately, then the National Guards, they were on the other side where you have the restaurant, but they did not do anything, they did not interfere. But you have them assembled there. So immediately we saw a reinforcement of NIA personnel coming in to rescue some of their personnel. So Babunjaya was dragged out with other colleagues, then they took them away. So we started our procession from the arch to the Ministry of Interior. When we got there, the minister came down, we handed our petition, and that was it. There was no arrest effected that day, and we all dispersed.
I would just like to summarize what you said so that we can understand you better. You mentioned that after Deda's death, the GPU organized the procession. And before the procession started, you realized that the security officers had infiltrated the crowd that were supposed to be protesting. I understand that this crowd was meant to be made up of only journalists. But they infiltrated the crowd pretending to be journalists. Can you tell us why you think they did that?
Because then we were all angry. And I know they were there to get information, because we were really angry why Deda was murdered. This was just the initial stage. Then information, we don't even know what was happening, but we know Deda has been murdered already. So, and you saw them in our midst, and you know, then if you mention NIA, what they are capable of doing. So that's the reason why when I saw them, I said, no, this is our day. If they want to provide security, fine, but let them not be in our midst. Let them follow us. We don't have a problem with it. But you can't disguise yourself as a journalist, wearing our shirts and marching with us. Who knows what is going to happen next?
Kindly tell us who organized the procession and the main people who were heading the procession at the time.
It was the Gambia Press Union under the presidency of Madi Sise, because you have all the media chiefs present. I mean the private media houses. I don't expect to see GRTS DG in that gathering. But the Point, Fourier, all the papers, their media chiefs were present, including senior members of the press, like the likes of Swai Bukonate, Samsar, and others. They were all around.
What about the Daily Observer? Who were the senior members of staff who were present at the procession?
Ndai Tafa was there, the most senior officer. Nikonde was the editor-in-chief. Like if you look at the composition, you have the management side, you have the newspaper side. Ndai Tafa was the head of the newsroom. So Ndai and team, we were all there to support.
Immediately after the procession, which you've mentioned, did anything happen to Ndai Tafa?
After the procession, I could remember we walked back to the arch again, myself, Ndai Tafa, and another person. But the NIAs were around. We saw some authorities, but they did not say anything. Immediately I told them, let's move from here, because now the crowd is no longer here. They can do anything. Then we just move away. So, but there was no arrest effected that day.
And subsequently, what happened, if anything, to her career at the Daily Observer newspaper?
Yes, immediately after this procession, Ndai too was going through issues prior to this. Then Sirif Bujang was the managing director of Observer newspaper, and Sirif and Ndai Tafa, they are very close, like brothers and sisters. So after the procession, they were not happy that Observer took part. So Sirif Bujang, I was made to understand, went to Ndai's house, either that day or the day after, and told Ndai not to come back, that these are orders from, I don't know where, that Ndai should just stay, like she was suspended verbally. There was no paper handed over to her. She was just asked not to come to work the next day. But you can see that Ndai's salary was even paid for some months after she was asked to stay. Because what she did was, immediately she was asked to stay, she also went to the Gambia Workers' Union and reported this. Then those people wrote to Observer that it's illegal, so it's either she's reinstated or paid her benefits until her retirement age. So for some time, they were paying her salary. Then they picked up another job at MRC. I think she came back to Observer to tell them to stop that salary coming. But she was paid after several months, until she picked up that job at MRC and told Observer to stop paying her salary.
Can we just get some clarity on who was not happy after the procession?
Well, as I said, the paper, the proprietor's name on the paper is Amadou Samba. And we all know Amadou Samba as a close associate of Yaya Jammeh. And at the time, Lanconte was our board chairman. Then Lanconte was working at Central Bank as the director of Foreign Currency Department, something like that. The late Baba Job. All these people were affiliated to Observer newspaper. Because as I said earlier on, sometimes they are not even happy. They will call us at night through the managing director to say we don't want opposition stories. Tell us the stories that you are about to publish. But during our time, we will refuse it. Severally, they will call, we said no. As long as the story is balanced, we'll publish it. You understand? I could remember UDP stories, Wajuara. The only hypocrisy came when Wajuara split with these people, with UDP, and formed his own party. That's the National Democracy Action Movement. That was the only time they were encouraging reporters to interview Wajuara, simply because he was going to attack UDP. I could remember Buba Balde buying even a bottle of beers for us to take it to Wajuara's house while interviewing him, so that he can say a lot about the UDP, about lawyer Hussein Odabo. So all those things were happening, and that was the hypocrisy. Now that there was a split, they want Juara to be attacking these people. But when they were together, they refused us to interview those people and carry it in our papers.
So you're saying basically that the owners of the Daily Observer newspaper, or the owner of the Daily Observer newspaper, who was a close associate of the president, was not happy with what happened that day at the procession, and that led to the suspension of Ndai Tafa Sose.
Yes, that's true.
And after she eventually left her position, what happened to you, if any?
Yes,
anything?
we were in charge. PK Jaju, that's Pakemo Jaju and myself. Then Sirif was MD. So time to time, Sirif was like basically the acting editor-in-chief as well. So we edit the stories, like the inside stories. Then we will leave this front page for the editor-in-chief, that's Sirif, to take charge. So it was like that. But as I said, they left, a week after they left, I resigned immediately, simply because I know they will come for us, either myself or PK Jaju. So immediately Tafa left, because prior to that, RVT, they were following me to come over as communications officer, but I was not interested in the job. So immediately Tafa was asked to stay at home. A week after, I tendered my resignation. I went to RVTH, I tendered my resignation on Thursday, then Monday, I picked up that job at RVTH immediately.
What do you mean that you were scared that they would come for you? Can you just elaborate on that, please?
One, they would like to compromise us. And my integrity as a journalist, I will not allow it. It's either I write factual stories or I quit the profession. So I know what they were trying with, it will continue. Either we do it their way or they embarrass us. Embarrassing us means sending us like the way they did in the Tafa. Then I said, this is not the place for me, despite the fact that I like the profession, but it's better I move on. So I then picked up that job at RVTH as the communications officer.
So you felt that if you stayed at the Daily Observer newspaper, your independence would be compromised. And as a result, you were actually not only forced to leave the Daily Observer newspaper, but you actually left the profession in a way and went and took another position at RVTH.
Yes, that's true.
Why did you feel that need to leave the profession completely rather than perhaps go to another newspaper and work there?
Well, that was not my choice, because if I had wanted that job, I would have moved a long time ago, because I love doing real journalism work. Despite the fact that where the new job I picked up is similar to what I was doing, though I will not be writing. But I will be the liaison officer between the hospital, the press board, local and international. So I was doing more or less the same functions. And I could even remember immediately I landed at the RVTH, I initiated the hospital bulletin and the RVTH news. The hospital bulletin comes out every month, and the RVTH newsletter comes out every quarter. So I was doing that for the hospital.
Very well. My question was more leaning towards why you felt you had to completely leave active journalism, so to speak, and go to RVTH. Why couldn't you go and join another independent newspaper?
Well, that was not my intention at the time. As I said, my integrity, I don't joke with it, even where I work presently. So I said it's better I just leave the profession and move on.
So you felt that anywhere you were, yes, you just couldn't practice the profession properly because yes, of the experience you had. Mm-hmm. Around, do you remember around the 20th day of May 2006?
20th day of May 2006.
Around May 2006, do you remember
yes,
if anything happened
yes,
around that time?
Yes.
Kindly tell us.
In May 2006, the 20th of May 2006, that was on a Saturday, the hospital, there was this important function that was about to hold, and being the communications officer, usually we will send request letters to all the media houses to invite them to come to the hospital to cover our event. As usual, with GRTS at the time, they will ask you to come and pick them, both the cameraman and the reporter. So on my way to pick the journalists at the GRTS, so I said, let me branch off and see Fatu Jahom Pasise. The reason why I branched off to see her, because the house is just, she was living at Carnifing, just by the market, because prior to that, she called me that she was traveling to the US. And that there was this adopted daughter called Maimuna that let me just be checking on her from time to time. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it because I was so busy. When she left, I couldn't go to the house to see Maimuna. So that Saturday, I said, let me pass by to see whether she's back. Immediately I got to her gate, I saw her in her car. That was on a Saturday. She told me that she arrived the night before. That was on Friday. So which means basically she just traveled for a week or so. After our usual discussion on the media and stuff like that, as I was leaving for GRTS, she called me back and told me to be careful. I then asked, careful of what? He said Pandirimbai is writing a lot about Assombi Bojang. Assombi Bojang is the late mother of former President Yahya Jammeh. I said, where this story is published? He said, on Freedom newspaper. That was the first time I heard of the name Freedom newspaper, that 20th of May 2006. Then I asked Fatuma, what was Pandiri writing about the freedom of the president's mom? She said, okay, the Pandiri wrote a lot about her admission at RVTH, about her ailment, all those stuff. I said, okay, what's the website address? Fatu Jahumpasise gave me the website address. Then that's how we parted ways. I went to GRTS, collected the reporters, then back to the hospital that Saturday. So I was busy with the journalists and the function that was taking place, so I don't have time to log onto the website until on Monday when I report back to the work. So I logged onto the website and I read the stories. Like the stories were published 2 weeks back, that the president's mom is admitted in a certain ward at RVTH, she has diabetes, all those stuff, about 2 stories, but published like a week or 2 weeks back. Then I told Dr. Njai. Dr. Njai was the chief medical director and was my line supervisor. He was the head of the hospital, the acting chief medical director of the hospital, Dr. Malick Njai. I briefed Dr. Njai about those publications. And I also asked for his permission, asked the communications officer to send a rejoinder to Pandirimbai, which was granted. After sending the mail, I first introduced myself to Pandirimbai as the communications officer of RVTH, and that going forward, I will request that anything he wants to write about the hospital, let him contact me as the communications officer. But in the end of that mail, I mentioned to him that should Dictator Jammeh find out that these stories were published, they may think that I gave you the information when I don't. So that was it. I never received any reply from Pandirimbai. The next day, on a Tuesday, there was this program I was supposed to attend with the public relations officer of the hospital to MRC. They invited RVTH for a function. So that early morning, I also received a call from the NIA. Someone called to say that he's calling from the NIA, that I should report to the NIA.
Mr. Witness, before we go on to your ordeal at the NIA, can I just take you back? You mentioned that Fatoumata Jahumpasise warned you because there were stories coming from Pandiri about the president's late mother and that you should be careful. Can you tell us why she had to warn you to be careful? Why? What was it about you in particular that she had to warn you to be careful about these stories?
Well, I believe it was due to our professional relationship, because later on was when I, in fact, suspected her of maybe being part of the hackers or knew something about the hacking of Freedom newspaper. But she did warn me, perhaps because of our relationship at the time, that you should be careful. Because if they find out that, okay, these stories were published on the Freedom newspaper, they will come after you.
And why would they come after you in particular? What was so special about you?
Perhaps I am coming from a media house and a journalist at the time.
And you also mentioned that she gave you a website, you logged onto the website, and you basically confirmed the story.
Yes.
Did the website or the article on the late president's mother reveal any sources that they had?
They did not. They were just quoting hospital sources, but no particular person was mentioned.
But they mentioned that they had a source from the hospital, which was RVTH.
Yes, and let me also add that Pandirimbai, the one in question, Pandirimbai, before becoming a journalist, was one time a staff of RVTH. And his wife, when I was working there, his wife was a theater nurse at the main theater. His brother Alajimbai was a reporter with the Point newspaper at the time.
Did you actually know Pandey Rimbai from before?
Yes, while I was at the Observer, he was with the Point newspaper. Then later on in I think the following year, 2003, 2004, was when he left for the US.
You also mentioned that when Fatoumata Jahumpa Ceesay mentioned Freedom newspaper, that was the first time you had heard about Freedom newspaper. Is that correct?
Very right.
Were you at all reading online newspapers at this point, any other online newspapers?
Yes, I was reading online newspapers, especially Senegambian news, because the founder, we used to live in the same area as Yankuba Jambang. So when he also left for the US, because he was with Citizen FM Daily Observer prior to leaving, so when he got to the US, he also established his own website. So I was reading a lot, almost all his daily postings. But for Freedom newspaper, that's Monday after Father Jahumpa told me. That was the first time I heard of Freedom newspaper.
You mentioned that you sought permission from your supervisor, at the Point, to actually write a rejoinder to Panderi. Can you tell us why you found the need to do so? And can you tell us what a rejoinder was? Yes, as a civil servant at the time, despite that I was the communications officer, before you talk to the press, you have to seek permission from your boss. Because it's in the general orders, you don't just talk to the press like that. I called Dr. Njai, went to his office, and he gave me the permission to write to Pandey Rimbai, which I did. And tell us what this rejoinder was. That I introduced myself to Pandey Rimbai, that going forward, if you want to write anything about the hospital, please contact us so that we can clarify. Yes. And why did you find the need to actually go to such lengths to talk to Pandey and to inform him to come through you the next time he wanted to talk about the hospital? The environment then, such things when they happen, they don't even wait to investigate. They may just point finger at you that you are the one who gave them the information. And then Freedom newspaper, like it was not it has never been in the good books of the government, especially talking of the president's mom. So you understand, I was really scared that if they should find out, because they will all think that it was me who gave Pandey the information, when that was not the case. Prior to Fatoumata Jahumpa Ceesay actually telling you about this particular story that was published by Freedom, was this story at all published on any other local newspapers? Okay, when the president's mom was admitted, some journalists, the print media, came to my office, one to seek confirmation and then asked the communications officer to elaborate on the ailment. But what I basically told them, the story is not true. I could remember telling them that the president would not bring his mom here, simply because I was also saving myself, because if I should talk to those people, I would not spend the night in that hospital. So that was the reason why I told them the story is not true. And none of those papers carried the story. So this story was not carried by the local papers? No. Because you actually denied, yes. You actually denied the fact that his late mother was actually admitted at the hospital. That's true. You've mentioned the fact that you tried to maintain your professional integrity whilst you were a journalist with the Daily Observer. This led you to actually resign from your position there and go to RVTH. Why did you feel the need to tell them something that was not true, or what led you to actually say these things to the journalist? Yes, that's what I just explained earlier on. If I should talk to the press at that time, or even to confirm the story, even if I deny the story, but my name is carried in the paper, they will come for me, that I was sure of. Because the president wouldn't want people to talk about his mother. And who would come for you, in your opinion? At that time, it was the junglers. Everybody knows the famous junglers. So you were scared that the junglers would come after you if you mentioned the president's late mother? Junglers, the NIA, any of them. As far as you know, after you confirmed the story with Freedom, can you tell us whether or not you could confirm the truthfulness of the article.
Yes, when I read the story, Pandiri was right. The Asombi Bojang was admitted there, either in Ward 6 and 3 or 8 and 3 or 6 and 7. I can't confirm, but the ward is the one opposite the admin building. But that she has diabetic, that I can confirm because I was not privy to the medical records. But what I can confirm in that story then was that yes, she was indeed admitted.
So what happened after that? You mentioned that you were called by the NIA. Kindly tell us what happened after you were called.
So the next day, as I was about to leave for MRC to attend a function on behalf of the hospital, someone called to say that I should report to the NIA office that early morning between 8 and 9. So I went with the hospital driver. When we got to NIA, I branched off, entered the premises. So I was received at the reception area. That's just by the gate. I identified myself that I am Malick Mboob from RVTH. Someone called me to report here. Then they went inside. One of the guards went inside and came back, escorted me to the office of Nuru Seka. That's the director of operations at the time. And when I got to Nuru's office, we exchanged pleasantries. Then Nuru asked me to sit for a while. Then he also started consulting others because he went out, came in again. I believe he went to consult his seniors at the time. Then he called one of the officers that's next door to escort me to their office. So when Usman Bojang came, Babukar Jeng came, escorted me to their office. That's the office next to Nuru's office. So I was there the whole day. At Nuru's office, Nuru didn't tell me anything. He just asked me to wait for him. He went out, came again, called Babukar to take me to their office. At that office too, let's say from 9 o'clock in the morning, I was there the whole day because Usman and Babukar at the time, one Usman Bojan shares office with Babukar Jeng. So anytime one leaves, the other will remain. So I was just there like that. People are coming in and out, other operatives as well. Until late in the evening, after closing hours, they did not tell me anything. Then at 6 o'clock, Babukar Jeng escorted me to the investigations department downstairs, where you have one of their cells, and I was locked up in that cell.
And up to that point, can you just tell us what the time was at that point?
That was in the evening, around 6.
And what time had you actually been invited to the NIA premises?
I got there before 9.
And during this time, from 9 a.m. to about after 6, were you told why you were invited?
No, none. Not Nuru, not the other officers, Usman and Babukar.
Were you told that you were under arrest?
They did not say anything. The only thing I had, please follow me. And when we got downstairs, I was locked up.
But your liberty was restrained?
Yes, because my phone, once you enter the NIA, you left your phone at the gate. So both my phones were left at the gate, so I was there, just like that. The only person who knew I was there was the driver who dropped me there.
And you were taken to the cells. Can you just describe where these cells were within the premises of the NIA?
When you enter the NIA premises, because the building you face is the counterterrorism unit and the political and religious department. On the extreme right is where you have the investigations department. Then the officer commanding at the time was Samba Sow, assisted by one Sirif Hydra or something Hydra. Because NIA, then they used to have a lot of Hydras. But Samba Sow was the head of this investigations department and he's in charge of the cell. So the cell in question is a tiny room with no ventilation, because the only ventilation you have is just small holes attached to the door. Other than that, there is no other ventilation where you can have fresh air, and it's also infested with mosquitoes. That's where I was locked up that evening.
What was the size of the cell?
Just tiny cell, small one. Because I could remember the tallest, because I will come to that later, I even find it difficult to stretch my legs across. So it's a tiny one.
Were you there alone?
Yes. At first, I was the first person they locked in that cell. Then later on at night, I started seeing some faces also. Some are journalists, some are staff of MRC, some from Gamtel. They were also locked up in that cell.
Do you remember their names?
Yes, one, Pamodu Fall. Pamodu Fall used to be the sports anchor at GRTS. He took over from Lamin Cham when Lamin Cham was removed as the sports anchor GRTS. Then you also have Musa Serif. He used to be with the Point newspaper. Today, I think he's running the Voice newspaper, Musa Serif. You also have a Nigerian journalist, Sam Obi. He used to be with City Limits as a presenter. Those are the journalists that night. Then you have Lamin Bojang from MRC Farafenye. You have Cherno Kamara, Hari Juf, and Hadi Dabo from Gamtel Serekunda Exchange. But Hadi Dabo was detained at the conference room that night. But the rest, the names I've just called, we all share the same that cell.
You mentioned that from the time you came into the NIA, which was the whole day, from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., you were not told the reason why you were arrested or detained. Before you were locked up, or during the time you were locked up, were you told why you were being locked up and why your liberty was being restricted?
The funny thing was that, in fact, one, I was not told, and secondly, I myself don't know the reason why I was called in there, or the crime that I'll be associated with. I definitely don't know.
Later on, you mentioned that certain people joined you.
Yes.
In the cell. You just mentioned their names. Mm-hmm. Do you know why they were detained, those people?
Yes, it was when those people were brought at night, because some of us, we know each other. Then that's the time I heard them saying that there was a crackdown, that is, there was a hacking on the Freedom newspaper. And all of us were subscribers. Those are the people they brought in. So they are going around arresting people. Then I asked who. They said the soldiers, police, NIA. All of them were going around. Because I could remember Harry telling us that he was in fact picked from a football park. He wanted to watch either Nawetan or football in one of the football parks. That's where he was picked. Others too were picked from different areas. So they were bringing them one after the other, one after the other. The youngest detainee at the time was a small boy, about 14 years old, that night.
Do you remember his name?
I can't remember his name, but he was released the next day.
But you do remember that all the people you were detained with, including the names that you have supplied us, were arrested in relation to this Freedom newspaper hacking. Was anyone else detained apart from these people that you mentioned?
Yes, the first night, these were the people arrested. But some of them told me that some were just questioned that night and they were released. Some women, but I don't know them. I don't even see them because I was all through in that cell since from the evening. So, but later on, the next day, day after, we started seeing some faces. A few days later, like the likes of Lamin Cham joined us after 6 days. Duta Kamaso, the same. Buba, he was a sergeant at the time, Sergeant Buba Jame from State House, also one of the bodyguards then, also joined us. And for Buba, I could remember when he was brought in, according to his story, he said he was tricked by Captain Musa Jame, Malia Mungu, who is also known as the Hell Manager, because he has those titles, Malia Mungu and Hell Manager. Because I could remember during the March 21st abortive coup, when he was torturing the likes of Bunja, Dabo and others, he always tell them that he's the Hell Manager. So we were sitting outside. So we saw Buba came with Musa Jame and one Amadou Diouf. Amadou Diouf too was one of the bodyguards. Then later on, Buba was telling us how he was arrested. He said he was at the State House one afternoon. Then Musa Jame called him that they are going for an operation assigned by the president, but they should hand over their weapons. They should leave their weapons to the armory. They were 4 in number, according to Buba. So Musa, Buba, and the other guy, they handed their weapons at the armory, that's their pistol. But the other guy, Amadou, carried his own. So they entered Musa's car. Musa drove up to the NIA gate, premises, and entered. Because he thought they were just going for a mission, but to where he doesn't know. So when they got to the NIA, we were just sitting outside at the investigation department. As Musa was entering, Harry Sambu, who was the DG at the time, was also coming from the other road. Because you have different walkways. Harry was coming from the other end, coming to meet them at the investigation department. immediately they got, he was not on cuff, he was not chained. They were just walking, coming in. Then when they got to the entrance of the investigation department, Musa Jammeh just simply told Hari Sambu, "This is Buba Jammeh." Then the next minute, Hari told Buba, "You are under arrest." That was it.
And do you know if this Buba Jammeh was arrested in connection to the Freedom newspaper saga?
Yes, later on, yes. Because what Buba told us, when Musa was arrested for allegedly selling weapons to some rebels in Casamance, because he was arrested twice. The first one, I was writing those ones. The second one about this weapon issue. Because I think some rebels were arrested and they confirmed that Musa was selling weapons to them. So when Musa was arrested, Buba was brought in to replace him. So maybe he thought Buba was behind his arrest. So he had that grievance. Because according to Buba, someone just sent a mail during that crackdown, that period when it was hacked already. Someone from the State House sent a mail to Panderimbai. I don't know the content of the message, but the conclusion is Sergeant Buba Jammeh, State House. So when they printed this was the crime he was accused of. But Buba denied having any knowledge of the Freedom newspaper. But someone sent a message to Freedom newspaper. The content of the message I don't know, but the conclusion is Sergeant Buba Jammeh, State House.
Very well, Mr. Witness. Can we just go back? These are people you've mentioned that were arrested days after you were detained and also arrested. Let's just go back. You mentioned what happened during day one. You were arrested. You waited briefly in the office of Nuru Seka, who was Director of Operations at the time. You were later moved into Babukar Jeng's office. And then you waited the whole day there. People were going in and out. You were not told the reason why you were arrested. No reasons were given for you being brought to the NIA, and you were later led down to the cells where you met other people. And at that point as well, you were not told the reason why you were locked up. You later found out from these detainees why they were arrested, and it was in relation to the Freedom newspaper saga. After they had informed you about this, did you suspect at that point that this is the reason why you were also arrested and detained?
I couldn't confirm that night because none of the NIA operatives said anything to me. But I heard my colleagues saying they were brought in because of the Freedom newspaper, because all of them confirmed that they were subscribers to the Freedom newspaper. So for me, I was just saying maybe it's also in connection to those reports. Though I did not confirm, yes, that was the reason until the next day when I was informed.
Did you have anything to eat or drink during this whole day?
When I came that morning, because I didn't take my breakfast before leaving the office, so when I came to the NIA2 the whole day, nobody served me food. I didn't eat anything that whole day until the next day. That was day 2.
And just before we move on to day 2, can you tell us whether you actually slept that night and how you slept?
We couldn't. Not just me, but the whole, because we were just chatting the whole night, thinking of what is going to happen to us next, thinking of whether the stories we've been reading in the papers or what we've been writing about journalists, the NIA, the tortures and all those things, whether we are coming to meet the same thing. So we've been talking about those things. So none of us, we couldn't sleep that night throughout.
Let's move on to day 2. What happened day 2?
So early that morning, around 5, 6 a.m., the security guard from the gate opened the cell door around 6 a.m. to escort us to the bathroom. Then from there, all of us, we all went to the bathroom. Then from there, we were all brought back to the cell until around midday, when the security guard, one of the guards came for me and escorted me to the conference room.
And just kindly tell us when you got to the conference room, you know, what you basically saw, who was present and where you were seated.
Yes, when I was escorted to the conference room, this is the first floor on top of counterterrorism unit and the political and religious department. You have the floor on top. Then beside the conference room, you have the operations department. At the conference room, immediately I entered, I saw a panel of investigators. I saw some officers. Some of them I recognized before. One, the head of the panel, who later identified himself as the head of the panel, was Momodu Hydra. Momodu Hydra was the Deputy Director General at the time of the NIA. Next to Momodu, you have Nuru Seka, the Director of Operations. Another NIA operative, Usman Bojang, was also present, and Babukar Jeng. These are the people from the NIA side. Then the police, you have Inspector Malamin Sise from the serious crime. Malamin is today the Commissioner of Police, Kanifing. You also have Sergeant Senindur, also from the serious crime of the Gambia Police Force. Sergeant Senindur. And Fali Jabang. Fali Jabang was from the State Guards, an intelligence officer, military intelligence officer at the time. So these are the people I can recognize.
Do you remember the rank of Fali Jabang from the State Guard?
Fali at the time was 002 or 001, but he's late now.
Who was heading the panel?
Momodu Hydra, the Deputy Director General of NIA.
And where were they seated?
You have the NIA on my left, because it's a table like this, a long one. I was sitting at the head. You have the NIA on the left, the police army on the right-hand side. So I was basically at the head of the table.
And where was Momodu Hydra seated?
Immediately after me on the left-hand side.
So you sat down beside Momodu Hydra?
Yes, Momodu.
On the table, and what happened next?
Yes, Momodu Hydra introduced the panel and then told me that they retrieved a document that I sent to Freedom newspaper, and that there are some publications that the editor of Freedom newspaper wrote. So they want, in fact, he told me categorically that I am the prime suspect. It's either I tell them my relationship with Pandiri, or tell them the source of the information, who was writing to Pandiri with regards to the president's mom. So I told them that I knew about this website basically 4 days back. That was on a Saturday. But the first time I logged onto the website was on a Monday. And the time they are investigating me was the day after. And the stories in question were published 2 weeks before. And again, I mentioned the name of Fatoumata Jahon Basise, that she told me about Freedom newspaper. They can confirm with her. Whether they did confirm with her, they didn't tell me anything. But I told them, Fatou Jahon Basise told me on a Saturday. I logged on a Monday, and here I am today, the next day.
Do you know how they actually got this email that you had sent to Pandiri?
Yes. When other detainees were arrested that night, they told me that the Freedom newspaper has been hacked. But there was mixed reactions, whether Pandiri sent the names of those people. Many were arguing. Some were saying, no, it cannot be Pandiri, by exposing the names of his sources. So we were debating about all those things in the night. So according to those people, they said there is a list that has been published. That's the names of those who subscribe to the Freedom newspaper. And again, they also told me that according to that report, when they hacked the Freedom newspaper, that Pandiri Mbaye has now joined hands with Yaya Jammeh. He's now an APRC member, and now he's exposing those who were informing him. That was what, but later on we learned that it was not from Pandiri Mbaye. The website was actually hacked.
The people that you were detained with on day one, were they part of those list of names that were retrieved?
Yes, some of them, their names are on that list of subscribers. But again, that day, when I met the panelists, Observer newspaper published that same list, but they branded them as informants. Informants, not subscribers.
What did the Daily Observer newspaper report, and on what day did they report this?
The headline, if I can remember very well, Freedom newspaper informants exposed. Then something was followed, then you have the names of the subscribers.
My apologies, please. You can continue.
So that list was what the NIA, the army, the military, that's the list they were following. Those are the people they were arresting and detaining at the NIA.
Were you part of that list?
My name was not on that list, but the document, the rejoinder I sent to Panderi was retrieved. It was with Mamadou Hydra.
And you suspect that it was when the Freedom newspaper website was hacked. That's how they retrieved it.
That document, yes.
So you sat, you know, on that panel, and what happened next?
Yes, there was this push and pull that I am the suspect and I should tell them all what I knew about this story. But I still maintain that I have never communicated with Panderimbai since he left the Gambia. And again, I never knew he had that website called Freedom Newspaper. So I maintained my innocence, but they didn't believe me. So after the interrogation, they asked Usman Bojan to take me to their office and obtain my statement. Usman took my statement without cautioning me. There was no independent witness. He didn't tell me about my rights. And again, sorry, before the statement, I was asked to give him my password so that they can search my email account, but I refused. I told Usman I'm not going to do that. I can open the email for you, but I will not give you my password. So he accepted this. I logged on, opened the website. Apart from that document which they retrieved, that was the only document that they saw with regards to Freedom newspaper. Then he brought me back to the panel again and reported that, yes, apart from the document that we have, there is no other thing relating that Malick sent to Freedom newspaper. So there and then, the panel, they said, okay, since there is no evidence for now, let's allow him to go home. That's what they recommended. As they were talking about this thing, Musa Jame walked in. Let me state it clear that Musa was not part of this panel. Maybe he just came, perhaps he wants to monitor what was going on. So Musa Jame walked in alone in military uniform. Immediately he got in because you can see that Hydra and Nuru, they senior Musa, but all of them were complimenting him because of his connection at State House, because of his closeness to the president. So many people fear Musa at that time. So Musa, they informed Musa that yes, I was going to be released because after the interrogation, the email searching, there is nothing that will lead me to those published stories. Musa told them it's not possible. And I quoted him in my statement that Malick, I already informed the president, that's President Jammeh, that Malick is the prime suspect. He's the one who told Panderimbai about Asombi Bojang. That was the turning point. Nobody can challenge him at that time. Well, then they asked Usman to escort me to their office and obtain my statement. So Usman, as I said earlier on, he did not caution me. There was no independent witness. He did not ask me if I want this thing to be taken before a lawyer. I wrote my statement, signed it. Then from there, we went to RVTH also. I went with one Yusufa Fai, Nuha Kijera, and the driver for the Bojang. They escorted me to RVTH, to my office, because when I was leaving, I have the office key with me. So I opened the office, they've searched everywhere. There was no document trace. From there, we proceeded. This was now, because the panel started around 12 until 3, then 3 we left for RVTH. RVTH to my house at Willingara. There too, they ransacked everywhere. Because then I was living in 2-bedroom. I was also single, not married. So they searched everywhere. There was no document search ever found. We went back to the NIA. When we got to the NIA, they took me back to the cell. So what happened next, I don't know. What they briefed their superior.
So you're telling us that after the investigative panel exonerated you, in essence, Musa Jammeh walked in and overturned that decision.
That decision, right.
Because he said you were the main suspect.
That's what he told the president.
And that he had already informed the president that you were the main suspect. So therefore you could not be released.
Just like
and you had to be detained. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Are you saying that he also formed this conclusion, that is Musa Jammeh, even before you were being questioned, before any investigative work had been done on you? You were branded as the main suspect.
That's what he did. That I am the suspect. I am hiding certain things, and that's why it stops. So I was taken to the cell again until that night. around 2 to 3 a.m. Because when I went back, I told my colleagues what happened, because they were asking me questions, because that I've stayed for several hours. I told them exactly what happened. So that night, but none of them were invited. I can't remember them calling those people. So that night, around 2 a.m., we had vehicular movements coming into the State House, coming into the NIA premises. A lot of cars with some personnel. So suddenly we all woke up. Then we were having mixed feelings. What is going to happen, and who are the people coming in? Is it for us? Are they for other detainees? Are they bringing in people, or are they coming for us? Because throughout, from the first day, we were thinking that maybe one day they will torture us. So the next moment, all we had was our cell door was open. One barrister is an NIA security guard, came with 2 other officers, soldiers, sorry. So they asked for Malick, and I identified myself as Malick, and they asked me to follow them. So as we were leaving, because from the investigations unit to the conference room, it's a narrow passage. I saw some other guys, some with guns, some without, some are not armed, some in uniform, some in civilian clothes. They were just standing by the narrow passage. So we walked past them to the conference room again. When I got to the conference room this time around, I saw Musa Jame. I saw Tumbul Tamba and one Ismaila Jame. At that time, when the online newspapers were talking about freedom newspaper, junglers, they always mentioned Tumbul Tamba as the head of the junglers at that time. Musa, the principal protection officer, Ismaila is one of the junglers. So Musa, I saw my statement, because Musa brought in a file, that the statement that I wrote in the afternoon. Musa brought that file. I don't know where he got that file from. So, and said, the first thing he asked me was, Malick, do you know the meaning of dictator? I define it. Are you telling me that President Jammeh is a dictator? I said yes. The other question is, he said, I am not happy with what you wrote. The statement you wrote, I am not happy with it. One, I've already told the president that you are the prime suspect, so otherwise means I am lying, and you know the consequences. One, I'll give you 2 options, Malick. You rewrite your story by yourself, sign, based on what I'm going to dictate you. Or, we will write the story for you, the statement for you, and you sign. I told him, Musa, it's either you kill me, but I will not change my statement. Because to me, that was my last moment on earth, to be honest. It's either you kill me, but I'm not going to change my statement. So he repeated this several times. He was the only one talking. Tumbul was listening, and the other guy. He said, I'm not happy with your statement. After several appeals, and I refused, he then told me that, Malick, if you don't change your statement, I will give you a VIP treatment. I don't know what VIP treatment is. He said, I will give you a VIP treatment. I said, okay, no problem, but I'm not going to change my statement. And he asked that Ismaila to escort me downstairs.
And before he escorted you downstairs, did he mention anything about your relationship
Yes.
with him?
Yes. In fact, I forgot about that one. When he asked the first question for me to define dictatorship, the other thing he told me was that it's payback time, Malick. You remember those days when you were writing about my stories. So now this is the payback time. Musa also told me that. Again, he also told me that I have been in this system over 20 years. You are just coming into the civil service. But look at your office. Look at your official car. So it's like an envy, sort of. So they escorted me downstairs behind the C2U, that's the counter-terrorism unit.
Mr. Witness, before we go there, I think we'll have to stop for now. I'm aware of the time, Mr. Chairman, and we have quite some way to go. We will have to continue his testimony on Monday because he still has yet to tell us about what exactly happened at the NIA on that day, because these are just the events he's explaining preceding his torture, which was quite a long session, and he has other things to tell us about other people who were also detained and tortured at the NIA. I have tried to summarize the testimony to the best of my ability, but to do justice to his statement, to his testimony, he will have to come back, unfortunately, on Monday.
Thank you very much, Counsel. You did very well in summary. Is the witness agreeable to coming on Monday?
I will. I'm supposed to travel on Saturday, but don't worry, I'll cancel that.
Sorry about that, but thank you again very much indeed. And we will hold our questions until the end of his testimony.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We will see you Monday morning, 10 o'clock, and have a very nice weekend. Meeting is adjourned.